Good evening, esteemed guests, colleagues, and friends. So many friends. My name is Dr. Phil McRae. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome you all to tonight's public lecture, hosted by the Alberta Teachers Association in partnership with the Calgary Public and Calgary Catholic Teachers. We are especially privileged and thrilled to be joined this evening by Her Honour, the Honourable Salma Lakhani, Lieutenant Governor of Alberta, and His Honour, Dr. Zain Velji. Thank you both for your presence. And I don't know how many of you know this, but Her Honour was an early childhood educator. So we not only love her for that, but all the work and support that she has given to education. So, I have important work for you all tonight. And this is a big deal because I just spoke to Miss Atwood. And it's kind of like at Christmas when Santa Claus comes and you want to hear the, roar of the crowd. I told her that she would receive the biggest, the rowdiest, the warmest welcome to Alberta that she has ever had. So you're going to help me do that. So let's start off with some shout outs from the crowd. First of all, where are all the teachers in the house? Let me hear you. All right. That's not, that's pretty amazing. Now, if you're a parent or a guardian, and that includes teachers, but if you're a parent or a guardian, I want you to clap your hands. The one night away from the kids, so we're going to make this worth its time. And grandparents, where are you? You have earned it indeed. And if you happen to be a representative of the King, could you just wave your hand? There's the Lieutenant Governor, there we go. We're thrilled to have you here, Your Honors. Now, finally, to everyone else who made it out tonight, thank you for being such engaged citizens. You all deserve a big round of applause. And I would like to give a huge welcome to everybody joining us online. This evening, we have live streaming to hundreds and hundreds of people from over 80 Alberta cities and towns, hailing from Fort McMurray in the north to Pincher Creek in the south. Across Canada, we have attendees from 7 provinces coast to coast joining us and the Yukon Territory. Tuning in internationally, we are delighted to be joined by viewers from 6 countries, from France, from Switzerland, from Spain, from Malaysia, and from the United Kingdom. And of course, joining us from the United States, we have hundreds of interested and concerned citizens from New York to Honolulu and from Grand Rapids to Boston. To all of you online, let's give you a hand. 700 people who are watching this evening. To all of you online, we feel your presence here in Calgary at the foot of the majestic Rocky Mountains. You're welcome. I'd like to take a moment now to respectfully acknowledge that we are gathered on Treaty 7 territory, the traditional land and meeting place of Indigenous peoples whose histories, languages, and cultures have shaped this place. I am so thankful to the knowledge keepers and elders with us here tonight and the many who came before us. I began my teaching journey with the Blackfoot people of the Kainai First Nation here in southern Alberta. I count myself fortunate to have been part of such a vibrant community for so many years, and also to have been honored with the Blackfoot name Apapum, which means lightning. We are indeed all treaty people. This land acknowledgement is offered as a sign of deep respect and gratitude to the Indigenous peoples whose ancestral lands we now inhabit. Tonight's public lecture is one of dozens that the Alberta Teachers Association has hosted since the turn of the millennium. Over the past decade, we've discussed creativity in schools with the very famous Sir Ken Robinson. We've considered the impact of artificial intelligence on education far before it was ever fashionable with Canadian Ambassador to China, Dominic Barton. And tonight, we explore issues of democracy, public education, and the common good with the unparalleled and prescient Margaret Atwood. Alberta teachers host these public lectures as a way to keep focused on the future and the essential role that public education plays in our democracy, where we are all co-creating Alberta. We don't want to be just a good place to live in the world. We want to be a place where we're good for the world. Now, just a reminder, a quick note on tonight's event guidelines. Please, no photography or video recording during this event under his eye. If you're not picking up what I'm putting down, go read The Handmaid's Tale. You're all welcome to take photos outside. We have banners, and you're welcome to do that. There's two, one at the entrance and one just outside of the concessions. Okay, our main speaker will take stage at 7 p.m., and I'll be back to hear a very rowdy and a very warm Alberta welcome. You guys are already primed, and you're excellent, so I'm not worried about this. But first, it's my pleasure to invite Jason Schilling, president of Alberta's 50,000 teachers, to come up and bring greetings. Jason is not only our president of the Alberta Teachers Association, but also an exceptional English teacher from the Lethbridge area. How many people from Lethbridge do we have here? All right. So, please join me in welcoming President Jason Schilling.
Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you for that warm applause. If I could record it, I would just take it with me everywhere I go. It's a great honor for me to welcome you to this evening's public lecture on democracy, public education, and the common good, featuring the esteemed Margaret Atwood. As the president of the Alberta Teachers Association, I'm thrilled to see such a diverse and engaged audience here this evening. Thank you for being here. A special welcome as well tonight to Her Honor Lieutenant Governor Selma Lakhani and His Honor Dr. Sahir Lakhani. Thank you for being here tonight and for your continued support of public education. Believe it or not, when I was a high school student, specifically around grade 10, I was incredibly shy. I was that hoodie-clad student desperately trying to blend into the background, praying not to be seen, and would die of embarrassment if called upon by my teacher. And as much as I tried to be invisible, I had great teachers like Miss Briner or my high school English teacher, Miss Dorothy Stanley, who saw something in me and worked tirelessly to draw me out of my shell, or in this case, a gray and burgundy Nike hoodie. I wish I still had that hoodie. Like all great teachers, they engaged with me and helped me refine my love for English. Slowly at first, I tested the waters and engaging in conversation in class, until a point when I'm certain that Miss Stanley thought that I would never actually be quiet again. I'm forever grateful to them and for believing in my potential when I could not see it myself. And it's through their belief in me that I was able to begin to find my own voice. Flash forward to today. As an English and drama teacher and president of the Alberta Teachers Association, I see students overcome incredible odds, inspired by the dedication of their teachers and supported by their parents and community. In witnessing the tireless efforts of my colleagues over the years, I've been continually reminded that public education is not just a service, but a lifeline. Public education is also a cornerstone of a thriving democracy. It is through education that we empower individuals, ignite creativity, foster critical thinking, and cultivate informed citizens. Tonight, as we delve into the intricacies of democracy, let us also reflect on the vital role that public education plays in sustaining it. In times of uncertainty, we often turn to the arts for comfort and inspiration. For example, Margaret Atwood's works have provided solace and provoked thought for countless readers around the world. Similarly, public education nurtures creativity and critical thinking, allowing students to explore their vast interests and find their own voices. However, we cannot ignore the growing divisions in our society. We see walls being built up, both literal and metaphorical, and these walls threaten to divide us. These divisions are mirrored in our classrooms, where misinformation, mistruth, and mistrust is sowing discord between parents, teachers, and the community. Alberta is currently the least funded school jurisdiction in all of Canada. And this underfunding is not just a statistic, it's a crisis that affects every student, teacher, and family in our province. Currently, we have overcrowded classrooms that lack the necessary resources teachers require to meet their students' needs. And the Alberta Teachers Association has been fighting for the common good of public education for over 100 years because we believe in its fundamental importance. And we will continue our efforts to advocate and highlight the need for proper funding that every student in this province deserves. Fundamentally, I believe that we fight for what we value. And for me, that is quality public education. And tonight, I call on each of you to join us in this effort. Having experienced Alberta's education system firsthand, I know the profound impact dedicated teachers have on students' lives. We are a democratic association of teachers who care deeply about public education, but we cannot do it alone. We need your voices, your support, and your advocacy. So let tonight be a catalyst for a broader conversation. Let us stand together to support and strengthen public education against the many challenges it faces. Let us build bridges of trust and collaboration between parents, teachers, and the community. We can do better. Frankly, we must do better for the sake of our students, our democracy, and our future. We must come together as one to protect public education. I want to thank you once again for being here tonight, and thank you for your unwavering commitment to the future of public education. Now, without further ado, I ask that you please join me in welcoming our next speaker. Zain Velji is a parent and a Calgarian who has demonstrated time and time again that he also advocates for the things that he believes in. Zain?
Jason said without further ado, and you're like, wait, Margaret? No, it isn't. It's me. Let me take you back. It's the 5th grade, Colonel McLeod Elementary and Junior High, and I've just won a writing contest. Now, do I remember entering said writing contest? No. Does it matter? No, because I have won. The prize is I get to meet an actual author at Crescent Heights High School as part of a writers' conference on the weekend. To 5th grade me, Crescent Heights was basically Harvard. Why are you laughing? Endlessly vast, brilliantly elusive, and my only shot at getting in was having my parents fake a spot on the rowing team. It's good. It takes a while. It gets to the back. Okay, thank you. So I arrive with my winning story in hand, feeling like I'm on top of the world. The author I was meeting was Talola Molel, the writer of The Flying Tortoise. Now you have to understand, I'm obsessed with this book. It has everything: a flying tortoise, ancient wisdom, adventure, a tortoise that can fly. It's practically a roadmap for life. Now, I have to give this guy, whose book I admire so much, a gift. It's just what my people do. So naturally, walking into my workshop, I hand him a signed copy of his book. Signed by me. Now, lucky for him, there was also edits. A few characters changed, removed. A twist added here or there, because I, as a 5th grader, thought I could help. And after all, I had just won that big boy writing contest. So there I was at Crescent Heights High, gifting the author his own corrected book. And that would be bad enough if it wasn't for the fact that his book was actually a retelling of long-beloved Nigerian folklore. And therein, folks, I believe, was my first microaggression. Now, Talola himself, the man was an absolute saint. He smiled like it was the most normal thing in the world to receive a better copy of his book from a kid. But looking back, I realized that while I may not have stuck the landing there, public education gave me that moment. Not just that actual moment, but that courage to be bold, the confidence to feel empowered, and the sense that I should put myself out there with no judgment, because I belonged to something greater than myself and there was folks to support me even if I fell. Whether it was at Renfrew Elementary, Colonel MacLeod, or Western Canada High, it didn't just give me knowledge, these places gave me citizenship. It didn't turn me into a product, it made me part of the public. And public education does that for all of us. We're not products of the public education system. We are living, breathing assets that derive from it. The system teaches us that we're not just here to make it for ourselves, we're here to make a difference for one another. In a world that feels more divided than ever before, public education is the place where we can come together. It's where we're taught that empathy, resilience, and justice aren't just simply words. They're values worth fighting for. And now, as I look at my 2-year-old son, as he screams loudly about more snacks and more Miss Rachel, I think about what I want for him as he inherits and enters a classroom. I want him to grow up and learn in a space filled with diverse voices and perspectives, where he naturally sees himself as part of a larger community, not as an outsider, having to go search for diversity beyond his everyday life. I want him to have teachers who see his potential and schools that support his growth, not just as a student, but as that citizen. Public education isn't just about what we learn, it's about who we become. And it doesn't sustain itself. As Jason said, as Phil says, it needs our voices, our advocacy, our action. So tonight, thank you for your commitment, not just to defend public education, but to build it, protect it, and cherish it. Let's thank every single teacher, every single educational assistant, and every single staff member who makes that possible. Because public education isn't just that service, it's a promise. It's our commitment to every single child that they're part of something bigger, something stronger, something that belongs to all of us. Where every child feels bold, brave, and true to themselves, like they belong in this world. Where they have the confidence to believe that they can write and rewrite better stories for their communities, their societies, and their future. Just not the way I did with the Flying Tortoise. Thanks, and have a great rest of your evening.
Thanks to Zain for his support of public education. I'm Stephani Clements, and I'm proud to represent the 10,000 educators who work for the Calgary Board of Education. I'm honored to be here today standing next to Allison McCaffrey, the president of ATA Local 55, representing the more than 3,400 Calgary Catholic teachers. We know that we have teachers in the room tonight. You need to be recognized for the hard work that you put in every day.
We are also so privileged tonight to be joined in the team of supporting public education with our trustees, our superintendents, and many of our senior administrators. Together, we all work together as a team to advocate for strong, sustainable, and adequately funded public education so that our students have the opportunities to become knowledgeable and engaged members of society.
We couldn't do this good work without the support of carrots. They make a great snack with the support of parents and caregivers. So you entrust us, carrots. Wait, when you hear the next line, it gets better, because you entrust us with the care and educational nourishment of your most precious cargo, and we respect that trust. We want all students to thrive in safe and caring school environments where students' needs are met, and we need you to advocate for that as well.
And we know that the work in schools is important, but we also want to acknowledge tonight all of the community partners in the audience. We know, and they know, that advocating for strong public education impacts all facets of our society. Our audience tonight is a great example of how we are all simply better together. We are a village, and our village must include all voices to ensure that our students and our children grow to be ethical, engaged citizens in our society and ultimately in our democracy.
From the depths of our hearts, we thank all of you for being part of this village, for coming out tonight and for vocally advocating for supporting and defending public education. So please give yourself a hand.
So we know that we stand between what you came here for tonight. So we'd like to ask Dr. Phil McRae to come back to the stage at this point and to welcome our very special guests for the evening. Thank you and enjoy the evening.
All right, are you ready? You know, that wasn't even close. Are you ready? That's right. That's what I'm talking about. It is now my honor to introduce tonight's esteemed moderator along with our legendary guest. Our moderator for this conversation is Shari Graydon. Shari is an award-winning author, speaker, spoken word artist, and advocate. Since founding her national nonprofit Informed Opinions in 2010, she has inspired thousands of women to amplify their voices and share their insights in the public realm. Shari is also a seasoned commentator for CBC Radio and Television, and her contributions toward advocacy have been recognized and distinguished by the Governor-General of Canada. In conversation with Shari tonight is none other than a Canadian icon, Margaret Atwood. Margaret is the author of more than 50 books of fiction, poetry, and critical essays. Her groundbreaking novel, The Testaments, which is the sequel to her classic, The Handmaid's Tale, won the 2019 Booker Prize. The Handmaid's Tale is now an internationally acclaimed television series, soon to enter its 6th and final season this coming spring, so get ready. She's also the author of the Booker-winning The Blind Assassin, and one of my personal favorites, Oryx and Crake. I didn't know there were so many other fans, but there we go, of Oryx and Crake. Margaret Atwood's contributions to literature have earned her numerous awards, including the German Peace Prize, a Guggenheim Fellowship, the Franz Kafka International Literary Prize, and the Penn Center Lifetime Achievement Award. In 2019, she was made a member of the Order of the Companions of Honor for her services to literature, making her only the 3rd Canadian to receive such a distinction from Queen Elizabeth II. Please join me in giving a loud and warm Alberta welcome to Margaret Atwood and Shari Graydon.
We're going to change the program just a little bit. I have lots of questions about democracy, the common good, and public education. And I'm going to switch the order and start with something you mentioned to me backstage. I'm going to invite you to talk about, let's start with the good teachers, not the ones that you maybe don't remember so fondly. So just maybe, yeah, one story.
Okay, I'll do one from public school and one from high school. So this was a very different education system. We're back in the 1940s, where you lined up 2 by 2 and marched in the girls' door, and if you were a boy, the boys' door. Nobody knew what happened if you went in the wrong door. You just, very, very bad, whatever it was. And then the boys and the girls both marched into the same classroom, and then you sat at these double desks that had little ink wells, places that you lift up and put your school books in. And it was pretty strict. But my favorite teacher of public school was called Miss McLeod. She was very good aim with a chalkboard eraser.
I had one of those too.
Yes, and she was very good. She was quite. I think she made tea every afternoon and had it carried down the hall by us to other teachers. I think she spiked it.
Which made her very amiable.
Get you through the day, right? But she was very big on pictures and drawing, and that's why I liked her. And she was also very good at having animals in the classroom. What with the gerbils, yeah, and the mice.
Okay, these are
my
tips.
favorite. Yeah, it's my favorite from public school. From high school, it was my exemplary teacher, Miss Bessie B. Billings, who I put into a short story called My Last Duchess. And Bessie B. had fame that spread beyond the high school that we were in. And what she was known for was getting you through the grade 13 final exams. Whether you liked it or not, you were going to go through. So she was a very good teacher. And it was she who decided that I had some talent as a writer. And she said of one of my poems famously, "I don't understand this at all, dear, so it must be good."
So was it not you must have known, or did you know? Did you feel like you were a writer before that? I mean, you obviously were writing.
Well, she didn't turn me into one.
But she recognized it.
No,
She
I was in
saw
her
you.
class when I started doing this. I wasn't in the class of Miss Florence Smedley, whom I also liked very much and was quite riveted by, because she had long floating white hair, and she used to recite Kubla Khan by Coleridge with her eyes closed while spinning around in a circle. And I really I admired her, because when I was, quote, a bit famous and they went back to make a documentary about me, she was still there. And usually you would say, oh yes, she was just shining with brilliance and I could tell right away. And she didn't say that. She said, she showed no particular ability in my class.
Let that be encouragement to every child in school.
Yeah, well, she was right. I didn't show any particular ability in her class because I was so mesmerized by this spinning around that she was doing.
You gave an interview to PBS recently that aired maybe after the election, but it was recorded before the election in the US. And you wisely, I thought, declined to make a prediction, although I know many people look to you for prophecy because you're so prescient. But you declined to make a prediction and said the outcome of the US election will tell us how attached to democracy Americans are.
Correct.
What did we learn?
Well, we learned what we could have learned by reading a book called American Nations that says there aren't just two, there are 11. And they have different outlooks and tastes and preferences depending on who settled there first. So Virginia would be English aristocrats, fox hunting, horse racing. New England, Puritans, lots of moral fervor, quite judgy. I can say that, my ancestors are them. Vermont, some of New France got down into Vermont. Deep South, people who are already slavers coming from the Caribbean there. And then we get to the West and the West Coast. So worth reading because it's not one nation. You can't say the American people and have it mean anything really conclusive. You have to say these American people, those American people. New York was settled by Dutch traders, and it remains that. It remains a trading community. That's what goes on there. So I won't make any blanket statements about the American people who are not homogeneous. But I will say we have seen how a few states can influence the outcome of such an election. Somebody for a joke, drew a map in which the Canadian border is shown going all the way down past around California, bits of the top part around New England. It says, problem solved.
So you declined to give the prediction. If you had in your heart of hearts, did you have a prediction?
I did not.
You did not.
No. I mean, I searched. I invoked, oh gods, let it be so. But it was darkness shone around. Sorry.
It was
But
darkness.
I've got some for what happens next. I'm going to put them on my Substack.
Oh, okay.
I'll get in
We
a
can
lot
all
of trouble.
sign up for that. You also created last year, or it came out earlier this year, a 6-minute video that you wrote and narrated called Democracy. Absolutely worth Googling if you haven't seen it.
Very short.
Very short, 6 minutes, but
Very visual.
you pack a lot of information into those 6 minutes. What prompted you to create that video when you did?
Well, I didn't create the video.
Well,
I created a drawing.
Okay, it
And,
came from a drawing.
This was in Financial Times, as I recall. So they animated it.
Okay.
I thought they did a pretty good job.
I thought they did too.
Yeah, so I wrote a description of it. It's in this little book called Democracy. And they took the drawing that I did, which I can do for you right now if you'd like, in the air.
Okay. Yeah, I think
Okay, it's a
before you do
circle,
that,
yeah?
let me just say, I watched the video a few months ago.
Yeah.
And I rewatched it on the weekend after the US election,
Yes.
and I found it terrifying. In
I'm a
way,
terrifying person.
well, but your analysis was not as terrifying before November 5th as it is now.
Not to you.
Not to me.
It was terrifying to me.
Okay, well, see,
'Cause
this is
I'm
why
really
you're...
old. Been there, done that, you know.
Okay. Okay, give us
We've
the...
had tyrannies. Okay, so it's a circle. Up at the top, you've got tyranny, and down at the bottom, you've got chaos. Okay, and through the middle, you've got where I assume we would prefer to live, which is a moderate kind of situation in which you're not wondering every day when you get up whether somebody's going to knock on your door, haul you off to a prison camp, blow you up, that kind of thing. So that's through the middle. Let's call it democracy.
Let's.
just for fun. So on either side of this democracy belt, let's pretend it's green, there's a big arrow going up from the left and from the right, going up to tyranny. You can get there either way. And there's another arrow going down towards chaos, one on the left and one on the right. You can get there either way. And people who are interested in having a tyranny often foment chaos because it gets people into a state in which they say, whatever, just make the trains run on time. Mm-hmm. Or they listen to somebody who says, I alone can fix it. And they think, well, there's a lot wrong. I guess, maybe we better do that. And then there's an arrow going from the chaos all the way up to the tyranny, bypassing the democracy part completely. So that's the drawing. And I think they illustrate it pretty well.
I think they did a really good job, and it's a brilliant conception. And I didn't really understand until I watched the video, because I failed to read the book, Democracy, or I probably would have known this already, but I didn't understand how effective a strategy sowing chaos was to speed up that route, that path to tyranny.
Well, it can backfire on you, and you might just end up with a lot of warlords and gangs. If you can, in fact, pull it together for your tyranny, you might just have a lot of chaos, but sooner or later it sorts out into something or other. What have I been rewatching on my phone, actually? I was going to say the TV screen, but that's not true. It was my phone.
Okay.
I, Claudius. For those who have never seen it, highly recommended. I think it was made in the 70s. And it's the really sort of grisly part of the Roman Empire. So it's after Augustus gets in. Julius Caesar gets assassinated, as we all know, because we went to public education. And we had that early on because there wasn't any sex in it. It's true. So he gets assassinated. There's some civil wars, and Augustus comes out the winner. And he keeps saying, of course, I'm going to restore the Republic, but just not yet, because people aren't ready. And then it turns into a hereditary empire. And that goes quite well as far as gathering wealth into Rome goes, but not so well within the palace, not so well within the imperial family, because they start assassinating each other. And finally, Caligula gets assassinated by his own Praetorian Guard. So that is a thing that can happen in an autocracy. And one of my predictions is, watch what's going to go on inside the White House. Not so much, we'll of course be watching what's going to go on outside it, but think of what's going to go on inside it. We have several people with quite large egos, backed by 2 billionaires who also have large egos and who don't like each other.
You're making me feel optimistic suddenly.
No, this isn't. This isn't necessarily good news. It doesn't lead to stability. But I think bookies are pretty soon going to start making book on how long Donald Trump is going to last. Because is he really necessary for these billionaires anymore?
Oh, okay.
On the other hand, are they necessary for him? Who shall win?
Now it's starting to sound like a worldwide wrestling match.
No, it's starting to sound like a series television.
Yes.
Called Breaking Bad. More likely Dynasty or House of Cards.
Right.
One of those.
You mentioned in the green room that you had spent a couple of years living in Alberta. How long ago was that? I
hate to say, because you probably weren't born.
What were you doing when you lived in Alberta?
What was I doing when I lived in Alberta? Trying not to freeze to death. Just for starters, yeah. So one of those years, so it was 1968 to 71, roughly. As I said, you weren't born. It was colder then, and it rained and then froze solid and didn't unfreeze for a month. So people were afraid to go out because it was all covered in ice. And that's when I learned palm reading and astrology.
I was going to get to that, although we agreed that Margaret's palm reading past may not sit well with science teachers.
It's very educational. You learn a lot about Renaissance science. because that's what they thought it was.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to stick to Alberta for a minute, and again, in the context of the recent U.S. election and the populism that has emerged here, or maybe has always been here. I'm new to Alberta. I've just been here for a couple of years. While a majority of Canadians were hopeful that Harris would win the election south of the border, 33% of folks living on the prairies were rooting for the other guy, and 44% of Conservatives, and Alberta has lots of those, were specifically also hoping for the outcome that in fact occurred.
Well, it wasn't 70%. It was under 50. And, you know, you have to get your mind around it, how other people think. And I think some people would shoot themselves rather than having a woman leader. And that's just true.
Speaking of women, The Handmaid's Tale, which you wrote 40 years ago, which is in itself...
You weren't born.
Which is in itself really speaks to why people want to refer to you as somebody with prophesying abilities. And so I know you refer to it as being prescient. Clearly, you are. Emily St. John Mandel, the Canadian author who lives in the U.S., you may have heard this quote. She said about after the fall of Roe versus Wade, she said about your book, "It feels to me like that the far fringes of the Republican Party read it and were like, we want that. Gilead sounds awesome."
Yeah, but they wanted it before I wrote the book.
So you didn't give them the idea?
No.
Okay.
I wrote the book because they already had the idea, and they were already talking about that idea. Now, not the outfits. That's a different thing. But so the core principles, and if you go to the Fisher Library at the University of Toronto, which is unlikely, but if you do, and ask to see the Handmaid's Tale papers that they have, you will see that I was making a collection of remember newspapers? Newspaper articles that bore on these themes. There were even some people associated with the religious right movements who called themselves handmaids.
Oh.
Yes. Well, it's very biblical.
Right. Handmaid too. Right. And I know you have often spoken about this, that you draw, that in your fiction, although it may be seen as speculative, you're drawing on historical examples from different areas.
Everything in the book has either happened or was happening somewhere, sometime. Because otherwise people would say, she's really weird. Look at this.
You don't think they say that anyway?
Yeah, they do, but not about that. Yes. So I didn't want to deal with people thinking that I just made it all up. So that's what the historical notes is doing at the back. It has some of those references. Somebody on what used to be Twitter and is now going to run the White House, said, "Where does Margaret Atwood think up this weird shit?" And I said, "It's not me thinking up this weird shit. It's the human race."
Does your knowledge of history give you ideas about how we can get out of these...
Weird shit?
Yeah, thank you. Better you should say it than me.
There have been periods when it was going the other way. But what you should be careful of is thinking that progress is a straight line that leads to the Emerald City of Oz, because it doesn't. Unfortunately, sorry to break this to you, but you can have quite liberal and open periods followed by quite repressive, and it is a swinging pendulum. So if it goes too far in one direction, people think this is just too disorganized, and or kids are all taking drugs and somebody has to do something about it. And then it starts going the other way. The middle is where you want to be. You don't want to be too far to either extreme because, as I said, up to the tyranny.
It's a very useful visual reference that you've now given all of us.
It used to be my job to take really complicated gobbledygook and turn it into simple questionnaires that people could understand. And I know that you have an interest in this as well.
When were you doing that?
When I worked for a market research company.
Ah, we'll forgive you for
You
that.
had, oh no, it was great, I loved it. Yes, I made some bad predictions. What were they? We tasted Pop-Tarts, and they blew up in people's toasters.
Yes, I know that.
Covered everything with hot jam. And I said, well, this isn't going to go anywhere.
Little did you know.
Well, they just put more cement in, so they didn't blow up.
Oh. If democracy, I'm going to switch from democracy to education, so I have a good segue here. If democracy is if public education is a pillar of democracy, but we're swimming in the sea of democracy and we take it for granted, do we have to come close to losing it in order to really understand how precious it is?
Yeah, I don't think you're close to losing it yet, but you're closer than you were. So it used to be something that people took for granted since the latter part of the 19th century. Mm-hmm. My mother went to normal school in Nova Scotia. She then taught at a one-room schoolhouse. So did my dad. This is the Anne of Green Gables pattern. It's how they got people into those one-room schoolhouses. And I used to think that normal school was where you got sent to be normal, but that isn't what it was.
Doesn't work for everybody.
At that normal school in Truro, Nova Scotia, that my dad saw my mother sliding down the banister and said, "That is the woman I will marry." Yeah, so it was thought that every place should have a school. And it was considered a great privilege to have one. And books in that era were also very cherished because not everybody had them, and they were expensive. And my dad said in his household, which was very rural, very backwoods, that the books would be read until they fell apart because you didn't have very many of them.
Right. And were they? Did you have books falling apart?
Oh, yeah. Not me, but
Then, yeah.
Yes, this is very backwoods. It's the early part of the 20th century. So it was assumed that it was a good, it was a public good, and that people should be very pleased that it was there. And you hear a lot of stories from people of that age, you weren't born, who were very resentful because their families pulled them out of school.
Uh-huh.
That they weren't allowed to go on because they were needed on the farm or they needed to go and work in order to help support their families. But going to school, it was a big deal. And it still is a pretty big deal when families who haven't had somebody go to university that one of those family members does. It sometimes creates family splits. So you think you're too good for us or you think you're so smart. That can happen too. But the idea that you could do this, that you could go from a position of not having access to a position of having access, that was sought after. So if you take away the public education, you're also taking away people's access to higher education. Mm-hmm. Unless, of course, they go to private schools. But of course, guess what? Not everybody can afford private schools. So one of my other predictions is after this election, you're going to hear a lot more talk about class than we've been having since the 1940s. Let me retrace history a little bit for you. So a lot of talk of class in the 30s. Then there was World War II. Still a lot of talk about class and things that people were writing. So Gabrielle Roy's Tin Flute came out in the 40s. McCarthy then happens. A lot of anti-communist stuff. And there's a reason for it. It's the Soviet Union. So then you didn't talk about class, because if you just talked about class, people would think you were a communist. Okay. So that gets shut down. And other things take its place. Things like meritocracy, things like different identities. But after this election, which was quite obviously divided along class lines, people are going to go back and look at class again. And in America, which has liked to pretend that it doesn't have classes, it's untrue. The English have always known it.
I did see
and they
actually a
still
commentary just today making the argument that you've just made, that this
Yeah.
election was
It's
much more
already
about
happening.
class.
It's already happening.
Yeah.
So much less about identities and much more about class. You're gonna see that happening before your very eyes. And public education has to do with class, because if you can't afford it, public education is your only resource for your kids.
So
There's homeschooling, of course, but guess what? In a lot of families, both parents have to go out to work. So homeschooling for a lot of people is a luxury.
here in Alberta, Alberta spends less per capita on public education than any other province in the country. And given what you've just said and reminded us of how fundamental public education is and the class division, and if we end up with a system of public education that is starved, and so more investments being made into private education, that exacerbates exactly the trends that you've just talked about.
Okay, so what happens when you get too much wealth concentrated at the top and everybody else isn't doing so well? The French Revolution.
Oh.
And that wasn't fun, just to be clear. It started out with a lot of enthusiasm and, you know, people going yay, and they renamed all the months of the year, but they also renamed all the days of the year. Make a clean sweep. Each day had its own name, which you were somehow supposed to remember.
365?
That's right,
Oh,
365.
fun.
Named after agricultural things. One of them was even called Manure Day.
Oh.
You didn't want to be born on Manure Day. So yeah, they changed everything. And that went on with great enthusiasm for the first part of it, and then it degenerated into a tyranny, as these things can, because there's two possibilities. The means justifies the end, or the means defines the end. If you don't like the road, don't go.
Right.
So Lenin was a end justifies the means. I got that backwards the first time. Yeah, the end justifies the means. So because we're full, our hearts are pure, and we're going to have this wonderful society at the end of murdering people, we just have to murder a lot of people, you know, because we're doing it in a good cause, right? You do agree with me, don't you?
Well,
the other way is, it's the Macbeth way, you know, the worse you become, the worse you become.
And what do you think we're looking at south of the border? Because as you were describing that, and I was thinking about hearing Americans who voted for the would-be authoritarian, talking about why they voted the way they did, and it sounded like the ends justified the means.
Yeah, of course.
How afraid should we be?
I don't think you should be afraid at all, by which I don't mean that there isn't something horrible happening. I mean that fear makes you feeble. That's what I mean.
Okay. And what would you suggest as the antidote to...
Take your thumb out of your mouth. I'm sorry, I'm a bad person.
Let me ask you this instead. This occurred to me earlier when you were talking about the pendulum, and I wondered whether or not, and I can't remember whether it was Martin Luther King who said the arc of the moral universe bends towards justice.
Well, this is this is what makes people give up on vigilance. It's all going to be fine. I don't have to do anything because it's bending towards justice all on its own.
As if we're not
That's not
necessary.
real. Yeah. There is no yellow brick road. There is no inevitably going here. And why do we think there is? I'm back to McLuhan now. Because of the invention of the codex book. So if you take a story and you put it on pages and you make a spine at the back, it has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Unlike a box full of scrolls, which can be arranged in any order. So what is the big model for that? It's the Bible. When they got together with these things that were essentially scrolls, translated them, and had to sit down and figure out what was going to be the beginning and what was going to be the end. And it gave us the idea that time inevitably moves forward until you get to this wonderful end. Yeah, it is the model behind communism, just saying. So what is real? Back to the tarot pack.
I was
I'm not
just
finished.
Okay, sorry.
So in the tarot pack, there's something called the Wheel of Fortune. And it's the goddess Fortuna, who is usually shown as blind and holding us sometimes. She turns the handle of the wheel, it goes around. And in some of the earliest versions, you have a king up at the top, the crown on, and it says, I am ruling. And then you have somebody going up this side of it, the left side, and it says, I will rule. And then somebody falling off on the other side saying, I have ruled. And then at the bottom, there's a peasant saying, I will never rule. That's the Wheel of Fortune. So that's how the Renaissance understood fortune. And the wheel is where we get the word revolution.
Right.
It doesn't mean that everybody's going to be equal. It means the wheel is turning, and those at the top are going to fall off, and somebody else is going to be at the top. Think about that. So you can think of the wheel as going along a straight path of time. You know, it does go from there to here, but it doesn't necessarily mean that here is better than there.
Right.
It comes and goes. So with the wheel turning, you're looking really at power games. And the power game in the United States has meant that those who have won it temporarily are a bunch of tech bros from California. And they're listening to everything you put on the internet.
Your books are deeply informed by both history and science. That's something that you spend a lot of time being interested in and exploring. And some would argue that today we're living in a world where science is suspect and history is often ignored. And thinking about the fact that we have thousands of teachers attentive here, how can our education system help reverse those trends?
Make it interesting. 2 kids.
Make
So
science.
what was I doing yesterday? I was watching a video on the Battle of Waterloo with an 8-year-old. Really interesting.
Oh.
Because it had the map showing, who was coming here, who was coming there. It was an animated map of what actually happened at the battle.
So the 8-year-old was interested in the Battle of Waterloo because it was
Because he could see it, he could figure it out. So, part of it is making things clear, as we have already discussed. And some of that is making things clear to kids, but some of it also is making it clear to adults why this kind of information is useful to their kids.
Mm-hmm. We're also living in a world where we're overwhelmed by information and social media and misinformation and living in news bubbles where we're...
It was exactly the same right before the French Revolution.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good.
Oh, good. Yeah, right.
So unpack that for me. What do you mean it was the same? Social media?
Well, it was the age of new print media.
Okay.
So we'd had the invention of the Gutenberg press, we'd had the proliferation of printed materials, which was deeply destabilizing to Europe because people could read the Bible for themselves.
Uh-huh.
And then they got ideas. And then they set up cults, and then they split away from the Catholic Church. And then they had wars. And then they went to Massachusetts. Which wouldn't have happened without the Gutenberg press. So books were still somewhat expensive, okay? Then we hit the age of cheap print media and proto-newspapers and some extremely rude and vulgar print drawings that would get distributed all over the place. And people were much more literate than they had been, and they were very interested in these things that they could read. But there were all different kinds of them from all different sectors of society, and some of them had things that were true in them and some of them did not. And again, like now, people would sit in cafes and say, what's happening? What is really going on? I've read this other thing, and they're not the same. And what's the real truth? So there was quite a lot of confusion about that.
And what allowed well, maybe this is not a defensible question, but I was going to say, what allowed the triumph of the, quote, real truth, or at least the closer to being true truth in that era, given that there were all these competing narratives depending on the source of the information?
Okay, so it depends on whether you're talking about provable science. In other words, I do an experiment, I get this result, I tell you what I did, you do it, and you get the same result. So science deals with the material world, period.
Right.
It cannot deal with spiritual beliefs. There's no experiment you can do about that.
No, and I guess I was thinking more about public discourse around what is not scientifically necessarily, although that would come into it, but what is happening in the world, whose version of reality can we trust, and maybe those were concepts that were not in operation.
Okay, now we're talking about stories. All right, whose story are we going to trust? Well, that is going to depend on who we are and which story we prefer. So some people prefer the story in which human beings are not causing global warming because it makes them feel just fine about throwing out all their plastic bottles. Although I would worry about the plastic because that is provable.
Well,
we can measure little microplastics in our blood.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Here in Alberta, the percentage of people in this province who are not convinced that human activity is contributing to climate change is close to 50%.
Of course. Why? Because the wealth of this province comes from oil. And who wants to believe that they're living off the avails of a planet-destroying substance? Nobody actually wants to believe that.
No.
I was just in Norway, where they again went from being a pretty poor country to being a very rich one. And the artists were all feeling terribly guilty because they all knew that the support for the arts was coming from this oil. How about that? But they at least knew it.
And is Norway further ahead in embracing reality?
Oh, they've embraced reality. They just don't know what to do about it. And that is the problem. It's a very difficult problem to solve. But saying it isn't a problem is not going to be helpful.
I also understand that here in Alberta there are fossil fuel industries attempting to influence the curriculum in a way that
Why would they not? You know,
so what
it's just human behavior. Of course they would try to do that.
Do you have any advice for teachers or the education system more broadly in terms of how to resist that kind of pressure?
Well, it's going to depend on how much of their money you wish to take.
Well, it's public education. It's dependent on the government.
Not entirely dependent on government. There's
Voters.
people other than it's dependent on voters. So do you want to let somebody influence your public education system in a direction of saying there shouldn't be a public education system? That seems to me to be pretty self-defeating.
Yeah.
Dead silence. Again, it's a dilemma. You starve to death if you don't take the money. If you do take the money, you become obliterated.
It seems to me that the teaching of critical thinking is more, I guess it's always been critically important, and in this world that we're living in with misinformation, social media, the evolving tech environment, that ability to look at information critically and ask in whose interest is it that I think this way. The nature of the work that you have done, both in your fiction and as well in your nonfiction, has often intersected with those issues, and I'm wondering if you want to talk a little bit about cultivating critical thinking in kids, the public more broadly.
Critical thinking. Let's narrow it down a bit. About what?
Well, we could start with climate change, but let me give you another example that's a current issue here in Alberta. The government has implemented introduced new legislation that would require, in order for a kid to get sex education at school, their parents need to opt in. So the teenager has to go home and say to their parents, will you let me take sex ed? And then the parents get to decide. And we know that the internet will pick up the slack if the kids are not allowed to.
What is it that they think children don't know? Anyway, so let's pretend they don't know anything. They're given no sex education. That sounds to me like just a perfect situation for potential rapists and child molesters. If the child doesn't know what's happening, they don't know what isn't supposed to be happening. Come over here, little girl. Yes. So if you put it that way, so the other thing you could do is say, all right, you don't want your child to have this education in school, but will you sign this affidavit saying that you have given the child this information at home to protect your child? How about that?
Okay. Are we taking notes?
Some parents just want their children to be 5 all the time. It's not going to happen.
I haven't seen research that says this, but my suspicion is that the level of unwanted teenage pregnancies, for example, the spread of STDs, all of these things correlate with a lack of sex education.
Of course. If you don't know what's happening, as I said, you don't know what isn't supposed to be happening.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know. Just something happened. I don't know what it was. And if you go back into the 19th century, there are a lot of examples of that. Person who didn't know they were pregnant because they didn't know what pregnancy was.
Right. Hard to imagine. It's
hard to imagine if you grow up on a farm, but not.
My mother grew up on a farm, resented being pulled out of school to work on the farm, and was a nurse, and taught us all those explicit references to body parts.
Yeah, so let's hear it for growing up on farms.
I want to move to the third theme of the evening, which was common good. And I'm wondering, is it possible to still have an uncontested notion of common good given the political polarization we're experiencing?
Well, I think some people will agree on some pretty fundamental basic things. It's common good to have public highways. It's sort of common good, because of course you're driving.
Yeah, I think bus lane enthusiasts might debate that. But.
Bus lanes? Yeah, but they're public highways. They're built with public money. Okay. Hospitals. Are they the common good? Mm-hmm. Well, are they private hospitals or public hospitals? Let's say that public hospitals are the common good. And let us say that public education is the common good. Shall we say those things?
I think that's fair. And, clean air, you can breathe.
I think having a fire department is the common good. Mm-hmm. Or having firefighters these days who will control the burning down of just about everything. Or try to control it. How about search and rescue operations in the mountains? They're very expensive. If people are that stupid, should they really be... Do they deserve to be rescued?
So these are all completely unarguable, I think, unarguable.
Well, we could argue them.
Well, we could, but let's not.
I would say having a military is the common good, because if you don't have one, you're very prone to getting invaded.
And we've been lucky so far.
Well, we're geographically situated. But I remember the dew line, do you? The dew line, distant early morning. So NORAD, remember it? No, you don't, because you don't, because you're too young. So it was a series of rocket launching stations across Canada that were going to send up and intercept any nuclear warheads fired across the top of Canada by Russia before they hit the United States. Because, hey, we've got fewer people.
Right, so why would they start with us?
They wouldn't. They would be intending to hit the States, but we would be intervening.
Right. Okay, you've taken me really off track here.
But my question is, was it the common good?
So I want to talk about the common good in the context of... Because all of those things that you talked about, even including the military, could be defended as common good. And I think lots of people in Canada on either end of the political spectrum, in the US on either end of the political spectrum, would agree on those things. And yet here we keep talking about ourselves as really polarized. And how can we get the conversation, our public discourse, and our politicians back to a place of focusing really concretely and explicitly on those common goods that presumably could mobilize us around a shared vision of what was possible instead of the polarized camps that we seem to be pushed into.
Yeah, I think we're possibly less polarized than you might think when it comes right down to it. But, of course, politicians find it favorable to themselves to emphasize differences. And also, in a multiple choice questionnaire, to make it only 2 choices. So people have, mix and match sets of values. And let's just talk about the referenda on women's health care that went on in 10 states in the United States. So it did protect women's health care in 7 states, but it also made it possible for women to vote for that and also to vote for Donald Trump.
Right.
Because you may have, one of these values, one of those values, and some purple and orange ones that nobody's thought about. So I don't think it's a question of just 2 things. I think it's a question of having only 2 choices. But if you had your druthers, you might want this other thing, which had some of the virtues of this and some of the virtues of that.
So is a political system where there are many more parties a solution to that, or is
I don't think we're talking solutions, because you're talking human nature. And believe me, it's varied. And a lot of the dystopias that we got in the 20th century, but not the 19th, because they believed in the inevitable progress. Ooh, yes, they'd invented sewer systems that just had to get better. But the dystopias usually show a society in which unity has been imposed. In other words, you only have one choice. It's that or death.
which has a way of focusing the mind.
It does focus the mind, so yeah.
One of the things you talked about in a recent PBS interview was an experiment or a collaboration project that you were part of where people came together.
Practical utopias.
Yes, I was
All
so
right.
interested in that. Would you talk
so
about that a little bit?
In the deep, deep background of history far away, I was once a Victorianist. And what did they do? They had a lot of utopian books, and they had a lot of utopian experimental groups that were really trying to set up improved societies. I think my favorite one of those is called Fruitland. And Fruitland included Louisa May Alcott's father, a transcendentalist airhead. They got together with some other transcendentalist airheads and decided they were going to move to a farm and grow fruit. And they were going to live off this fruit that they were going to grow, and also on the vegetables that they would grow, but only ones that grew upward, because ones that grew downward were too earthy.
Ah.
You know that about potatoes,
Of
don't
course. Root vegetables.
Very earthy, yes. So they tried this. The problem was that nobody knew how to grow fruit or vegetables either.
They needed to live on the farm.
They needed to have lived on a farm at some point in their lives. This was not the case. So off they were in this utopian community, and the men sat around discussing the true, the beautiful, and the good, as they do. And the women tried to figure out what they were going to have for dinner.
Oh, as they do.
That lasted about 6 months when they'd used up all the supplies they'd brought with them, right? And there wasn't any fruit. There are a lot of examples of failed utopias.
I'm interested
So I wanted them to do a successful one. And in order for a planned society to be more successful than the alternative, it has to be practical. By which I mean you have to know what you're going to eat, where are you going to live, where those materials come from, what is the clothing going to be made out of, how about the energy? You need to solve all those problems that human beings have always had to solve. They're the same problems. The solutions are different. So that was their chore, that was their task, to come together in groups of 25 and figure it out. And the mandate was carbon neutral or carbon negative, scalable, so cheap enough so people could actually do it, and attractive enough so they would want to. It's no good telling people they have to wear flour sacks and eat nothing but tofu, because they will not do it.
No.
They might do it for a week. That's it.
Oh, some people do it forever, but
They're very rare.
This experiment that you did, is it scalable? Do you think? And I guess I mean,
could we use it as a template for getting people together in groups and figuring things out? Absolutely, you could. But there's a couple of things I'll mention. We hired facilitators in case they fought, which they did. So I said to the group of facilitators whom I met online, how many of you were summer camp counselors?
And?
Yeah, all of them except one who had been a swim instructor, and I said, same thing. Yes, so you have to have people skills in order to make this work in any way whatsoever. So they did very well, I thought. We had 8 groups, 200 people, and then a lot of others sort of sitting in on it online. This was a 2-way online platform. We hired illustrators to draw pictures of what these things would look like. And at the end, they presented their utopias. And they did sound very nice from the clothing point of view, etc. We didn't get into much about the arts. So the problem with perfect societies is there's no conflict.
So where does the art come?
Well, maybe if you have a different notion of art. If you have a notion of art that's sort of like mood music that you listen to while going to sleep, then it might all work out. I don't know, we won't, that's another problem. But there were 2 things that they found it quite difficult to focus on. And these are also intractable problems with utopias. What do you do with people who don't agree with you? What do you do with people who break the rules? What do you do with criminals? Because there will be some in your utopia, maybe fewer, but there are going to be some. Are you going to have a police force? Shall you have prisons? What's your plan? And I referred them to Marge Piercy's utopian novel, Woman on the Edge of Time, in which the time traveler goes to the future, they've got everything worked out, men breastfeed, you'll be happy to know. And
Who will be happy to know?
You all. And the problem, the time traveler from the past says, what do you do with people that don't agree with you? Well, we send them to re-education camp. So what do you do if they still don't agree with you? We shoot them because we don't believe in prisons.
Well, that's simple.
It's very direct.
Did that come up in your experiment? No.
Well, no, I gave them this example, but none of them decided to follow that path. But they didn't want to think about what they would do instead, because, of course, if you designed a utopia, who would disagree with it?
So
and that was
I don't know.
One problem. The other problem was money. How are you going to exchange things? Are you going to do barter? If you're going to have a form of money, how is that going to work?
It's complicated.
Evidently, yes.
In Ontario, just last week, I'm making a hard segue here.
Are you going to say a bad thing about Ford?
No, but
you're not.
It's
Just watch
implied.
It.
It's implied. In Ontario last week, 7 youth got the Superior Court of Ontario to rule in their favor that they could essentially sue the government for putting a cap on their emissions target.
On their what?
On the government pulled back on its emissions targets.
Oh, okay.
So these are a bunch of young, environmentally concerned youth who are essentially trying to sue the government about their failure to act on climate change.
Well, that's interesting.
I thought it was worth celebrating, and I know similar things have happened in the US as well. And in pursuit of, if not utopia, at least a planet that we can continue to live on.
Okay, let me feel badly about pouring cold water on this idea.
Okay.
I think it's great that they're doing it. The people behind such governments have really large amounts of money.
Right.
So, yeah, you win. Here's the money. Goodbye. Like that.
So these are young people, you know, perhaps.
It's like the cigarette case. The cigarette case. A bunch of people sued the cigarette companies.
Yeah.
They got a lot of money, but the cigarette companies had much more money.
Yeah.
And they just kept on doing whatever they were doing before.
You've been an early adopter of technology and an inventor of technology, your long pen.
Yeah, it doesn't mean I approve of any of it. But I'd like to know how it works.
Okay. Well, I guess my question was going to be, are you at all encouraged by emerging technologies and their capacity to address and mitigate some of the impacts of climate change?
It could be used for that, but again, not to pour cold water on. All of this stuff depends on a copious supply of electricity and on lithium batteries and on something called rare earths. They're called rare earths because they're rare.
They're rare, yes.
So-
Sunshine, on the other hand, sunshine and wind.
Sunshine and wind depends on batteries, does
Yes.
it not? Yeah, you still have to store the energy that you are creating if you want the lights to go on at night.
I'm going to try and end on a more optimistic note.
I'm
'Cause we're out of
not
time.
being pessimistic. People are working very hard at inventing new kinds of energy storage. They're working very hard at inventing new kinds of lithium extraction that is not so shrieking polluting and that doesn't take so much energy to do. I was a judge on something called Women in Green Tech. It was a contest, and we saw a lot of very, very interesting projects. So it's not that people aren't thinking about these things; they are. So that's my optimistic note.
Okay.
Will they be able to do it in a scalable manner that can be applied, everywhere, or in enough places so that it will make a difference? Somebody sent me one of these, fun questionnaires that they do. And they said, if you could talk to one person who has the ability to mitigate climate change, who would it be?
And?
The head of China.
Ah,
That would be meaningful.
right. We are out of time, and I want to thank you for your wit, for your humor, for your indefatigable taking the conversation exactly where you wanted it to.
I love you too.